Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle With. Out, Bruce Prichard. I can't believe this is real, but we are putting out an APB for Mr. Bruce Prichard. He is off the radar, and we can't reach him. No fooling. We think it's because he's in international waters. He's been plotting a big getaway, like an episode of DuckTales. You know, where all the ill-gotten gains that he's made in WWE all these years, he's just diving in that shit like Scrooge McDuck on some island he bought. No, not that island. No, serious business. Bruce took his after WrestleMania vacay, and I thought he'd be back by now, but he is not. So good for him. Unfortunately for us, it means, well, you're just stuck with me. But that's not a bad thing because we're talking about a really special show. A real sleeper show, I feel, in the history of WWE. I'm talking about Judgment Day 2004. We are nearly at the 20-year anniversary of this show. And if you'd like to check out Backlash 04, JR and I just did it. That was the April of 04 WWE pay-per-view. This is the May of 04 WWE pay-per-view. And just take a listen to this. I mean, listen, I don't usually think of 2004 as being a banner year. But dude, the opening match is Rob Van Dam and Rey Mysterio taking on the Dudley Boys. Can you imagine? I mean, if you would have told me that that was possible in like 1997 or 1998 or 1999, well, we got it just a handful of years later at Judgment Day 04. That's where we also would see Mordecai. Remember him? Yeah, he's taking on Scotty 2 Hottie. We've also got Charlie Haas and Rico taking on Hardcore Holly and Billy Gunn. How about Chavo Guerrero with one hand tied behind his back, taking on Miss Jackie? John Cena defending his U.S. title. This is before he's a made man, taking on Rene Dupree. The Undertaker working with Booker T. And in the main event, boy, one for the ages. A match I'll never forget as long as I live. I remember exactly where I was sitting. I remember who I was watching with. It was an incredible performance by both JBL, who all of a sudden was thrust into the spotlight, and Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero is just a few months removed from beating Brock Lesnar, from hugging Chris Benoit in the middle of Madison Square Garden in front of all those fans, a sold-out crowd, and all that ticker tape coming down. They were both champs. It was an emotional journey for Eddie Guerrero, and you want to talk about the blood, the sweat, the tears. It's all here in this match. But think about from a JBL standpoint. Man, that dude, he'd come in as sort of a, I don't know, maybe a mid-card performer as Justin Hawk Bradshaw. And then eventually we know became a new Blackjack. And well, maybe that didn't work out the way we hoped. And he became an acolyte and that became the APA. And it was such a fun act. But when Ron Simmons finds himself being released, I think it would be natural if you were JBL to wonder, what about me? How about the main event and a bloodbath for the world title? That's the story of Judgment Day 2004. And no, it's not Dominic Mysterio's Judgment Day, but what a fun pay-per-view it was. Bruce and I talked about it way back when, and we are going to heat that up for you right now, hoping to pin down Bruce sooner rather than later. Lord knows I'm ready for another episode of Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. But in the meantime, enjoy Judgment Day 2004. It's going to be a good time. Oh, and speaking of a good time, before we get going, I want to remind you guys about Embark. You know, Mother's Day is right around the corner. And if your mom or your wife loves their dog, man, Embark is going to be a gift that everybody is going to be talking about come Mother's Day. Embark is the provider of the most accurate dog DNA test on the market. It's the ultimate gift for every occasion, especially for Mother's Day. My mom loves her dog. I can't believe this is real, but she is a Labradoodle. She's been with my mom for 9 years, and I'm convinced that my mom cares more about this dog than she does my sister and I. The dog is such a big part of her life. Like, the dog has eyelashes that my mom goes on and on about. So when I learned about Embark, I thought, man, this is perfect for my mom. I mean, if your mom or your wife has a special dog and you know how much their dog in their life means to them, then they want to know more about that dog. Like if my mom could have a conversation with her dog, she would, but she can't. This is the next best thing. It's a great gift for the dog lover in your life, especially Mother's Day. Pup parents can learn more about their dog because this is the most accurate dog DNA test on the market. Of course, you'll get your dog's breed mix, especially if you're adopting. That's important. You're also going to find out when you do that, hey, what are the genetic health risks associated with these breeds? They're going to screen for more than 250 different types. You can also connect with other dogs who share the dog's DNA. Yeah, it's like the world's first canine relative finder. So we've all sort of worried about or wondered about or heard about a family tree. Well, now you can do that with your dog. But the information about really understanding your dog's ancestry, and are there certain health conditions they're predisposed to? Are there going to be certain parts of their personality that maybe you don't understand? If you just want to discover your dog's family tree and geographical origins, and maybe even see who their great grandparents were, dogs have that too. But really, for me, it's about the peace of mind for health insights. You know, they're going to screen for over 250 different genetic health conditions, and that's going to empower dog owners with valuable information. You never want to have to think about that day we all dread as dog lovers. And I think this is a big part of it. But I really just think it's fun too, to connect with relatives in the Embark database and create this sense of community. And let's be honest, what'd you get Mom for Mother's Day last year? I bet you don't remember. And even worse, I can guarantee you she doesn't remember, but she won't stop talking about this. The whole family will have a deeper connection with the dog. You're going to learn things that you'll just talk about from now on. It's a great gift for someone who has a brand new puppy or someone who just loves experiences. I'm totally sold on Embark, and I think you are too, or you will be if you'll just try it. And by the way, let me mention this. They're a longtime advertiser for us here on the program because Bruce and I absolutely love our dogs. And we want you to take a look at Bruce's dog's results, because he did this for Bean Fernum. And we now know, and you can actually see this link in the description for today's episode, that old Bean is 64.2% American Pit Bull Terrier, 22.1% Australian Cattle Dog, and 13.7% American Bulldog. It's really cool. I would love for you to just take a look, and it's in the description for today's episode. But if you're enjoying Something to Wrestle and all that we've done here through the years, and you're a dog person, we want to thank EmbarkVet.com for supporting Something to Wrestle. And we want you to go to EmbarkVet.com to get free shipping and save $50 on the breed and health test when you use our promo code WRESTLE. Seriously, get the dog DNA test that is trusted by millions. Right now, Embark has a limited time offer on their breed and health test for our listeners. So go to EmbarkVet.com to get free shipping and save $50 with our promo code WRESTLE. That's EmbarkVet.com and use the promo code WRESTLE to save $50 today. That's EmbarkVet.com, EmbarkVet.com, promo code WRESTLE. So now without further ado, man, let's get to it. Very special edition of Judgment Day 2004. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
You know, Conrad, just been lazing out by the pool, doing a whole lot of nothing. You know how it is around here, man. Just there's just so little to do that I don't know. Just getting bored.
Sure. Well, we appreciate you finally being able to sit down and us hook up. You and I have had the craziest schedule ever. You for work, me for, well, some interesting family stuff that I'm sure everybody's in the loop on. And we're finally able to sit down and record. Our plan was to air Judgment Day last week. Life threw us a curveball, so we aired the roast of Bruce Prichard, which had been in our plans to air the week of StarCast. So that got moved up. StarCast is happening right now. If you haven't already, make plans to join us on Fight. You can see all the events from last night, and of course, everything going on today and tomorrow and Sunday. And Sunday, it's our last scheduled live Something to Wrestle. And Bruce, I'm pretty excited about this. This will be the first time you and I have had something like this live streamed, and it's our last scheduled Something to Wrestle.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those happy, sad moments.
It is a little weird because you and I have gotten so comfortable with, you know, at least once, sometimes twice, or even 3 times a month, getting a band together and jetting across somewhere in the United States and gathering up hundreds of Something to Wrestle fans and throwing together a live show. And now you're jetting across the globe for millions of WWE fans instead. And it's a little bittersweet to know that this might be our last live Something to Wrestle. I hope not, but if your schedule continues, I don't see how we've got time to do any more.
Well, by God, the definition of impossible is nothing. So, look, there will be more live. It's just a matter of when and matter of actually getting it scheduled, getting on the books, and figuring out how and when we can do it. So I refuse to give up, and we will figure it out. It's just, frankly, the break will be nice a little bit. Did you hear what I said? The break.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, either way, go ahead and make plans to join us on your holiday break this weekend. Of course, it's Memorial Day, and what better way to spend it than overdosing on some wrestling at StarCast on Fight. But let's talk about why we're here today. This is a big one. I'm pretty excited about this. Judgment Day 2004. We've recently talked about this show a little bit when we covered JBL. I think this is one of the shows that really made him, and I think even he would agree. It was all about his feud with Eddie Guerrero, and Eddie Guerrero's performance on this particular show is unworldly. So if you're only going to watch one thing on the WWE Network this week, may I recommend it be this main event from Judgment Day 2004. Of course, we're covering it because it happened 15 years ago, May 16th, 2004 at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, California. It did a 0.38 buy rate, which is roughly a $3 million gross for company revenue. And I guess we should mention we're less than 2 months away from the draft and WrestleMania 20. So we're still very fresh into this sort of new era of the WWE. And we've covered that draft in the archives and just recently covered WrestleMania 20. So if you'd like to catch up on those, you can certainly do so at somethingtowrestle.com. And Paul Heyman was the SmackDown GM, and he's been drafted to Raw, and he promptly quit in storyline. We also saw Triple H be drafted to SmackDown, and then a trade would send him back to Raw in exchange for Booker T and the Dudley Boys. Man, it feels like the more things change, the more they stay the same. You know, the draft happens, and then maybe Vince changes his mind, and no, let's just go back to how it was.
Well, I think there's just sometimes once everybody gets settled and you see it, it's one thing on paper, but then when you actually put it all together, you look at it and go, maybe this works better over here. And you make your adjustments and then try and settle in for a little while.
You know, we've talked a lot about how in 99, the business is just at an all-time high, and that's always fun to sort of see how quickly it's growing. That's not the story here in 04. In May of 03, your average attendance is 4,629 folks. In May of 04, we're down to 3,878 folks. So we're down 16.2% as far as average attendance for these shows. And your gate is actually down a little more. You go from 162 down to 133. So you're down 17.7%. Your house shows are not nearly as sold out either. Obviously with less attendance, if you're running the same size building, that's going to follow suit as well. But ratings are down a little bit too. In May of 03, you're at a 3.8. In May of 04, you're at a 3.62. And a really, really alarming is when you've got 2-digit losses on ratings here. When you go from a 3.2 for SmackDown in May of 03 to a 2.93 for SmackDown in 04. So this is the first time we're seeing something with a 2 in front of it. Chat me up about, how the ratings were being viewed here. This is a post Monday Night War era. Maybe it's not as important as it once was. Maybe it still is. I know fans and Wrestling Observer readers and, people who sort of keep up with the business end, they would say, oh no, this is something that we need to pay attention to. Is that the same reaction from within the office?
Well, we definitely were paying attention to it. However, at the same time, we knew that changes had to be made, not only on SmackDown, but on Raw as well. So there was a conscious effort, and the statement was made often. Okay, we're going to have to take maybe 4 steps back to take a couple going forward. And we knew that. We knew that this was time to shake things up, make some investments, and do some experiments with talent to see if it's going to work. It was a conscious effort. We knew things were going to go backwards for a little while because we just didn't have the storylines and we didn't have the talent at the time setting storylines to really know. And this was an experimental time.
I do want to talk a little bit here about Steve Austin because it does feel like this is the end of an era. And maybe it's one of the reasons why, you know, it feels like such an interesting time in the company. Steve Austin and Vince McMahon have verbally agreed that they're going to do business together indefinitely. But they're going to sort of try to go their own separate ways because contractually, they're not going to work it out for him to be a full-time character. And that happens when they meet in San Antonio on April 6th. And one of the things that I saw in my research is that they're going to work on some of these projects together. Of course, they want to do a WWE film with, you know, so he has a movie vehicle and we know what that's going to be. But I also saw that they had plans to market a Stone Cold Steve Austin beer. Now we know, fast forward, I don't know, a decade, and there was the Broken Skull IPA, but that's not what the plan was here. This is 04. So there was a plan for a WWE Stone Cold beer. Is that right? What can you tell us about that?
Well, we had been working on a beer probably since 98, going back in time of trying to do something with whether it was Steve basically sponsoring a beer or having his own beer. And we had talked several times with different brewers across the country, across the world, to do a special beer, from the Coors Brewing Company to the Anheuser-Busch, their light brand, to do something with that. And some Canadian beers had their hat in the ring, and it was an ongoing process. Trying to get through that process and weed your way through was a painful process in and of itself. However, you know, we had talked about it. Yes, we definitely had been working on a beer for Steve for a few years at this point, and it had started to come to fruition, where it looked like it was actually going to happen when everything, communication and just disagreements, started to take place.
Let's talk a little bit about something that was written in the Torch. And I didn't know this. The WWE was under the impression that Austin was close to signing a deal with Dream Stage Entertainment, although those at DSE and others say the deal is not close to being finalized. Austin is said to be waiting for offers from any interested parties in Japan before committing to one, although DSE would have the inside track because they seem to have the most money and also have Bill Goldberg. So it is fascinating to me that even here in the early 2000s, or maybe the mid 2000s at this point, I guess for 04, when things in America aren't exactly what you'd like for them to be, you think, oh, well, I'll just go make money in Japan. That sort of feels pretty old school. But DSC, of course, is Dream Stage Entertainment. And some of our MMA fan listeners would be familiar with that because that's who put on the Pride events. You know, back in the day, there were two major organizations, the UFC here in America and Pride Fighting Championships, across the pond in Japan. And they also put on a series of wrestling events, named Hustle, and Hustle was going to be like their big new thing. When you guys hear, or do you hear that maybe Steve is talking about doing something in Japan? Because I mean, they did have some names that you would remember, you know, from way back in the day, like Abdullah the Butcher, who was obviously a big deal in Japan. And of course they had big Japanese talent like the Great Muta, but they also had Goldberg once, Bob Sapp, who was a big name for a minute, which I know in hindsight doesn't seem like it should have been a thing. Did you hear he was talking to Japan, and was Vince McMahon concerned about that?
I don't think we were ever really concerned about it because of Steve's health and his neck issue being the way that it is. To work that style with Goldberg might have been different because I think that Bill probably could have protected Steve and that they could have gotten through whatever they needed to get through in a match. But Steve going over there wasn't that big of a concern. And you hear those rumors all the time, especially in that time frame, because if a guy was unhappy, I'll just go to Japan. And Japan was also starting to lose its allure here because the bigger companies just weren't doing the kind of business that they had done before. But I'm sure it was a rumor that was out there. And from our vantage point, as far as Steve going to work for somebody else on any kind of full-time basis, that certainly wasn't a fear. It was, well, we definitely want Steve for us. If Steve's going to do anything in the wrestling business, we want him to do it for us. And that was the battle. That was what was taking place.
It's speculated, of course, that what Hustle would want to do, and I don't think this is a big stretch, is if they were to land Austin to try to do the match with Goldberg. And it just feels like an Austin Goldberg match not happening for Vince McMahon and instead happening for Japan would have made his freaking mind melt. Do you think that, hypothetically, if that discussion would have gotten farther enough along and Goldberg was allegedly saying he wanted 7 figures per man to give Hustle the rights to market that match, do you think Vince would have done whatever he could to beat that offer and try to make that match happen in WWE?
I don't know if he would have. I really don't know, because obviously we never got there. It was never taken seriously to that next level. Had Steve gone to work for someone else in a wrestling capacity, I think that would have hurt. That would have hurt Vince. I think it would have hurt him personally. But it didn't. So it's kind of hard to speak to that. And if there was a match out there, the match was definitely Goldberg versus Austin.
Yeah. There would have been money in them, their heels. And Wade even speculates that he thinks it would do 375,000 or more buys if it was on a WWE pay-per-view, as a main event. Where does that rank with dream matches, do you think? It looks like we're going to get Undertaker Goldberg. Where do you think Austin Goldberg is all-time dream match?
I think it's right up at the top. I think you have, especially from the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars era, that was the dream match. There were really two. It was Austin Goldberg. I'll give it 3. Austin Goldberg, Austin Hulk, and Undertaker Sting.
All right, let's keep it moving here. Brock Lesnar is going to make the news because on April 17th, he is involved in a motorcycle accident. His bike collided with a minivan. Those damn minivans.
God, I hope that minivan was okay.
Yeah. He's taken to a hospital, has glass removed from his forehead. He's going to need a few stitches, but he's telling everybody he's fine. And he's going to work out for NFL scouts on May 18th in Phoenix. And the latest word from the NFL insiders, according to Wade Keller, is that no one was taking his bid to play in the league seriously last month. But now that they've seen him work out and gotten some numbers, more than one team is at least intrigued. When you're hearing that, hey, wait a minute, maybe he's getting a little attention, and Sports Illustrated is even going to, write a feature story on him. Do you think this has more legs, or was this always sort of viewed as, this ain't going to happen, but let him go try?
Well, we wanted him to get it out of his system. That was one thing. I don't think that anybody thought a guy who had never played football was going to be able to walk on and play professional football. Then you see this son of a bitch working out the way that he does. And with very few exceptions, I've never seen an athlete like Brock Lesnar who's been able to adapt to the different sports that he's chosen to excel at. And I think if Brock had another year and had actually, played a little more football, he could still be playing ball for all we know. The guy is just this really freaky genetic freak.
A freaky genetic freak.
A freaky genetic freak, yes. And I think if he had had more time, who knows? Because he shocked a lot. He shocked us, and we knew, and he certainly shocked the football world enough to get him on a team. Didn't last long, but he made it, that's one of those 1 in a millions that you would never dream would happen.
So let's talk a little bit about Lance Storm, because it's reported here at the beginning of May, quote, after months, if not years of frustration with his role in WWE, Lance Storm announced on Monday on his website that he is retiring as an active wrestler. He has said he's going to be moving into a role as a trainer with the developmental territory, Ohio Valley, and he hopes to eventually move to a position as a road agent with the WWE. And so his final match is going to air on Sunday Night Heat against Stevie Richards. And he's going to cite his frustration with his, quote, lack of contributions, which I guess means lack of push. But also his back problems have been greater lately than he had been letting on. He's got some bulging discs, and it's caused him to miss some house shows. But this is a guy who'd been around forever, Smoky Mountain and ECW and WCW, and now of course here in WWE, but he retired relatively young. Were you shocked to hear that Lance Storm was going to hang him up in 2004? No, he had some nagging back injuries, and I think that Lance was a great guy to have on the card because whoever you put him in the ring with, he's going to have a good match. There just wasn't a whole lot of personality there, and Lance was bland on the microphone. The audience didn't really connect with him. However, when the bell rang, it was hard to find a better performer. Plus, he had a skill that not everybody can do, and that's teaching. And with Lance, he was able to parlay what he could do in the ring and teach people how to do it. Now, some of the greatest workers in the world can go out and do it. They just can't tell you how they do it or how to do it. Lance has that skill and tried to hone that to make him a trainer, but it was no big surprise at all. I guess we should mention Lance retires when he's just 35 years old, which is obviously, before a lot of prime years in professional wrestling. All this time later, of course, he has gone on to become one of the more prolific trainers and you said teachers. What do you think his legacy in the business is going to be?
Hopefully, I think it will probably be his contributions to the folks that he's trained over the years and brought into the business. And, Lance in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, that was his first big national exposure, but Jericho being in that tag team, I think Jericho's the one who took the spotlight there because Chris had the personality. Chris had, that package. And then Lance was the workhorse. Chris was the Ricky Morton and Lance was the Robert Gibson. So as years go by, I would hope that Lance's legacy in the business would be one of his contribution to the business afterward with his training.
There's a lot written about Johnny Ace. And
there is
in the newsletters here. The rise to power of John Lauritas, 38, has been notable considering as an active wrestler, most of his experience was in a different culture with a totally different product. As new WWE Vice President of Talent Relations, it solidifies him as one of the most important and most powerful players in the industry. And they do a little bit of a write-up about what his background was and when he broke in and how he bounced around. But they also talk about when he joined WCW, it was happening at sort of a weak point for WCW. Eric Bischoff is the person who hired him to be an advisor and help the wrestlers lay out the matches as, WCW is essentially dying. And it was be written, he got a lot of praise at first from the wrestlers, but those in the company who had high hopes coming from a logical background, since if nothing else, All Japan had logical booking, particularly compared to the WCW nonsense that was killing the product, were ultimately disappointed. He was viewed as more of a politician, never spoke up, and even when the stupidest ideas were presented, he managed to get along great with everyone and keep his job amidst the chaos. When most of the WCW front office wasn't hired after the WWF bought the remnants of the company, Lauritas was not only hired, but quickly became second in command and heir apparent to Jim Ross in the talent relations department. So we'll talk a little bit more about his role, but were you shocked when he became the new head of talent relations, or did he take to it like a fish to water? And how do you respond to the criticisms that he had positioned himself more as a politician?
Well, okay. We have a lot of fun here talking about John Lauritas, and I've always said this about John, and we joke about it privately, even to this day, that until you've been in the talent relations role, you have no idea. And talent relations is probably the most thankless role in the company. You get all the heat, you get none of the credit. And John went in knowing that and did a hell of a job trying to follow up Jim Ross, who also did an excellent job in the talent relations department. But Jim was on his way out. Jim wanted to move back to Oklahoma, and Jim wanted to do broadcasting, not do as much work in the office. So John was younger, hungrier, and wanted it. I mean, he really wanted to have that position. He wanted that job, and he did a good job. It's not easy. And what people on the outside that have never been there, what they call politicking, is called doing his job. And you're the bad guy. You're the hatchet man. You deliver the shitty news. You're the one that has to give everybody the information they don't want. And it's thankless. It's all 24/7. And John did a good job at that. He really and truly did. Like I said, I love to bust his balls, and we all point to, the fuck ups, like hiring the wrong one-legged man. Oh, he did have one leg. Things like that. But at the same time, we've all had our fuck ups, and his was just funnier to do because he talks like this and loves Vince's arms. God damn, they're huge. It was for us, man. We were grooming him for that from day one when he came into the company, because he had that kind of an aptitude. He fit well in the office, and he fit well in the locker room.
Talk to me a little bit about the difference in style between a JR and a John Lauritas, specifically what they're looking for in talent. I don't think it's a big secret that JR is going to look for legitimate, strong athletic backgrounds, whether it's college football or high level amateur wrestlers, with the idea being, if you've excelled in those sports, you have the mental toughness that is needed to survive in pro wrestling. I think that's how JR would categorize it, but Johnny Ace has a different approach. And one of the criticisms would be that he doesn't value those athletic backgrounds the same way. And instead, he's going to put more of an emphasis on bringing up a certain type of look, whether it's with size or bodies. So we're going to hire some girls who look like they're right out of Playboy, and try to see if we can make something out of them because they're pretty people, maybe more so than they had a strong background. Is that a fair criticism, or how would you categorize the two?
No, because it comes down to what the creative team and what Vince McMahon is looking for at the time. So you try to get into your developmental system as many as you can to have a variety, whether it's the athletic type, whether it's the beauty queen type, whatever that may be. You try to have a choice, and you try to have some variety in the recruits that you're recruiting. It's not Jim Ross didn't have it. I didn't have it. Johnny didn't have it. We didn't have free reign to just go out and hire whoever the hell we wanted. So it was, what are you looking for? Okay, we're going to go out and we're going to find you several of that type and several guys that may fit that, put them in developmental and take it from there. So as far as Johnny and what he brought in, he was brought in what he was asked to bring in. That wasn't 100% his call. And here's what we need. That didn't take place. That was a directive.
So Vince used to really value college football backgrounds, and then he stopped.
He still values it. No, he still values it, and he valued it when Johnny was doing it too. It probably got more press from a JR, if you will, because goddamn, I like my college athletes, and JR had a higher value on that. It's not that Vince didn't by any stretch of the imagination. Vince wanted athletes. Vince wanted athletes that could adapt and that could learn the business.
Let's talk a little bit about tape libraries, because this makes the observer. The WWE is getting very aggressive in trying to purchase pretty much all the available semi-major league pro wrestling video footage on the market. The idea is that Vince wants everything that is there. The company at this point already owns the AWA library, the WCW library, theoretically owns the Crockett and Old Georgia libraries through the WCW purchase, as well as the ECW library and the Smoky Mountain library. I believe they have purchased the Stampede library or are on the verge of doing so. And a lot of work is being done currently on this project. And the company this past week hired Peter Clifford as the new vice president of affiliate sales. Clifford's main responsibility will be to sell the idea to cable and satellite services, as Clifford has worked since 1996 in both affiliate sales and later managing director of affiliate ad sales for the Golf Channel, where he managed a golf video on demand venture. So it comes out here in 2004 that, hey, Vince is trying to collect all the footage everywhere, with the understanding that the original idea is going to be WWE on demand and WWE 24/7. And of course we know what that became, the network. When did you first know that Vince was going to start snatching all this stuff up? Because as he acquires some of these old libraries, they are major expenditures. In hindsight, not nearly as major as they looked at the time. Did you know this was always the plan? Had he always laid it out like that?
The plan evolved. The plan's still evolving. And when different areas became available and those properties became available, here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. The older wrestling promotions, will say that it's called Georgia Championship Wrestling and the AWA. Those would probably be exceptions to the rule. The majority of those old time wrestling organizations, they didn't keep tapes. Right. They shot their TV a lot of times in a television studio. Then they would take one tape and they would bicycle that tape around the territory. What I mean by that is they would take that one tape and they would take it to the next television station, and that would play. This is a tape that's going to play this week, and then they'd take it to the next one. This will play next week, and so on and so forth. Then they would go back and they would pick those tapes up and tape over them and do the same thing, bicycle those tapes all across. So if you're in Tennessee, you do TV on Saturday, and what airs on TV on Saturday in Memphis is what's going to direct you to Monday night show in the Mid-South Coliseum. However, that tape then gets bicycled to Nashville, to Louisville, to all the markets, Chattanooga, whatever it is, all the markets that they run. And the folks in those markets will see that tape the next Saturday, the next week when their television runs. And then you'll get the same matches in your town 1 week later. And that was cycling and bicycling the tapes. But all those tapes would be picked up and recorded over. So when someone has rare footage or a rare master, there were so few back in the day, Mid-South started keeping their tapes. They were one of the more current promotions that actually kept some of their tapes. We had always kept not all of our masters, which is just a shame when you sit back and think about it, but we kept our shows and we would edit what we called Best of Texas Wrestling in Houston. So that was a syndicated show that would go to Saudi Arabia and that would go to India and places like that. We had masters of those, but not masters of the entire taping and things like that. They just didn't exist. So for those who had those kind of libraries, yeah, Vince was interested in getting them and using them is part of what he was hoping one day would be the WWF network.
It's crazy to think about too, because, you know, $2.5 million becomes the price for all the Crockett and WCW and Georgia stuff. And $3 million is what he's going to pay for the AWA library around this time. And there's talk that Mike Graham here doesn't want to sell the Florida footage, and Kevin Von Erich isn't opposed to selling, but he's got no financial motivation to do so, to sell that world-class collection. I was, I guess, a little shocked that Bill Watts didn't own the Mid-South footage. His ex-wife did. Wow. That was news to me.
Yeah. Anna had control over it. She got it in the divorce. And I don't know that Bill had ever put any big value on it. He probably did to her, said, okay, hey, well, this is worth $10 million. My God, you know what you could get for this. The fucked up thing here was the fucked up deal. Paul Bosch had original Mid-South programming on the Houston wrestling television shows. So when we started with Mid-South in 1983, that was about the time that we started to keep copies of the shows, of the masters that we would do that would air locally in Houston. And what that consisted of was an hour of the Mid-South show. That would be the middle, wrapped around by matches that were taped in the Coliseum, because that was our deal. And Houston had many years of Mid-South programming in the Houston office. When Vince is looking for all this stuff and Mid-South was giving him a hard time, so just go by Houston, because Houston has it for these years. It has it for the meaty years that you want, and it will decrease the price for whatever Mid-South is looking for Anna, because she had ridiculously high inflated value of what she thought that those tapes were worth. And I said, well, just go buy them from Houston. They've got them, and they don't know. So that's how all that went down.
It's pretty amazing that, you know, Vince had the vision to go invest millions of dollars. Now, you know, the company's worth billions. So it worked out. Man, I got to tell you, watching some of these old Eddie Guerrero matches really bring me back and make me wonder, what if he was still here to enjoy wrestling today? What if he would have gotten that WrestleMania match with Shawn Michaels? Think about he was already a legend, but how much bigger that legend would be if he continued to add to that resume and that career that we're still talking about. And we all know that, unfortunately, we lost him very, very young. And we don't talk about men's issues a lot here on the show. Today's episode, though, is brought to you by Manscaped. And I got a little did you know from them. Did you know that one man every hour, every day is diagnosed with testicular cancer? In fact, testicular cancer is the most common form of cancer among men aged 15 to 35. With April being National Testicular Cancer Awareness Month, our friends over at Manscaped have partnered with the Testicular Cancer Society to spread awareness for men's health and early cancer detection. Visit manscaped.com/TCS to learn how to check yourself for early signs of cancer. And as always, you can use our promo code STW for 20% off plus free shipping at Manscaped. I really do want to take a minute here to just talk about men's health issues that are important to me. Now, I don't know anyone who's personally fallen victim to testicular cancer, but a different men's health issue is prostate cancer. And my dad beat that more than a decade ago. But boy, it was awfully scary. And I'm thankful that, with that sort of thing in mind, that we can perform simple routine self-checks at home while we're enjoying our regular Manscaped products like we do every day. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra is the one I want to key in on. It has 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads, a standard one just to take a little off the top, and then a new foil blade to go smooth and sleek. It's also got a couple of LED spotlights, which will give you better visibility, and you don't have to worry about making a mess because it's waterproof. You can shave in the shower or the bath, or if you're JR, you can trim it down in the ocean. You can also travel comfortably with this too. It's got wireless charging and even a travel lock feature. But in addition to providing the right tools and solutions for comfortable and easy grooming, Manscaped is committed to raising awareness and giving support for the fighters, survivors, and families that have been impacted by testicular cancer. And that's why they'll be donating $50,000 to the Testicular Cancer Society. Help save some lives and some balls by going over to manscaped.com/TCS and sharing their funny, educational check yourself video. And while you're at it, grab 20% off and free shipping with our code STW. Because like a famous American philosopher once said, take care of your mentals, your balls, and your chickens. Something else that's going to work out. Wade Keller would report that Bret Hart is going to meet with Vince McMahon after the April 19th Raw that was in Calgary. And they're getting together to discuss the DVD project that we're eventually going to get. This was a long time coming. This DVD in his career winds up being released in 2005. And a lot of people thought that this would never happen. But a source was telling Wade Keller here, they'll definitely do something, but it won't be wrestling. With the idea being that, if Bret Hart's going to be in an angle, it's going to result in him getting the better of Vince McMahon or Shawn Michaels to sort of avenge the Montreal Screwjob incident. And Bret's currently, negotiating with Lloyd's of London to try to get a payout from WCW still. So there's lots of reasons why people say, this won't happen. Of course, we know they are going to wind up working a match together and they are going to find a workaround. But just the idea that Vince and Bret getting together, it doesn't feel like that was ever going to happen. Not to me. Were you shocked, or at this point, do you just assume Vince can repair any relationship?
Well, I believe he can. I really do. He's got some incredible healing powers for one reason or another. But Vince and Bret met initially in Boca Raton in December, I think, of the previous year. It might have been. It might have happened after this. I don't know. I do know there was a meeting. The first time meeting took place in Florida. And I was in Boca. I did not go to the meeting, and I wanted to just to say hello to Bret. But they met, and I was like, why wouldn't we do business together? And as they went through everything, they finally got to a point. Let's start with this DVD project, and then something else comes after that. And obviously it was, Stu and Bret and everybody going into the Hall of Fame eventually, but fences were mended, the guys shook hands and hugged, and it was time to move on. So it was a good thing.
I can't wait to talk about this. April 27th, Smackdown. We see the debut of Mordecai. You're saying that in a Vince Russo voice, and Russo's not here.
No, that's actually a Dan Madigan voice.
Well, chat me up about Dan Madigan and his Mordecai. This is Kevin Thorne, who we know is going to eventually do a silly vampire gimmick too, but a white hood, white pants, white top. He's supposed to be the polar opposite, pardon the pun, of the Undertaker. Is that the idea?
Well, that was a working idea of trying to create opponents for the Undertaker. And we always make fun of Dan Madigan because he was from Boston. He actually was Mayor Quimby, and he would talk about Mordecai, and he did the vignettes with Mordecai and so on and so forth. But it was Kevin Thorne was a hell of a talent. He was a hell of a worker, had good size, and he could move. I think the gimmick just killed him because he tried to work the gimmick instead of being Kevin Thorne in the ring and just let the gimmick carry itself, if that makes any sense at all. He went in slow motion and was too worried about doing gimmicky things than having a good match and making things logical.
Yeah.
We were experimenting. Another one of those failed experiments.
Let's talk about a few more of those. This is fun. Melsford, right? As it turns out, the Eugene character is going to be portrayed in a manner suggested here a few weeks ago. This has nothing to do with what was written here, as it was suggested by many people beforehand. But the original gimmick of a modern day Rain Man crossed with Mighty Igor looks from TV to be a guy whose Rain Man strengths make him pick up technical submission wrestling at an incredible speed. The character looks to be that of a simple man who actually is a great wrestler, and after a great television vignette where William Regal was attempting to teach him and then stretch him, he wound up stretching the teacher. The evolution of the Eugene character. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, it was something for Nick Dinsmore, and Nick Dinsmore came from the Ohio Valley wrestling. He was a product of that environment and from that training system. A tremendous wrestler that Vince felt, he came across very childlike in a lot of ways and created this idea and this gimmick for him. And it was named after a young man in Pittsburgh, Eugene, who had been around the wrestlers that all the guys loved. And his father was a shoemaker, and Eugene was a very special young man. And it's like you would walk in and have the absolute worst day in the world. And Eugene would be backstage with his dad, and he would go, "Hello, bros," and you couldn't help but smile and just hug this kid. And all he wanted to do was be around wrestling, and he loved it. And he was a savant. He could tell you everything that was happening everywhere. One of those, April 14th, 1964, and give you the match and give you the finish and the referee and how many people were there. But different and wonderful. But Eugene was just this really warm kid that Vince loved so much. And he fell in love with Nick and thought, oh my God, can I have we could make a real Eugene. And that's how Nick Dinsmore became Eugene. And he wanted him to be this, pretty much what you said, this powerful savant that wants to wrestle, but doesn't know how to wrestle. And then all of a sudden gets in the ring and holy shit, he picks it up quick.
Let's talk about Kenzo Suzuki.
Do we have to?
Yes, because apparently you guys named him Hirohito, which I guess was a Japanese emperor. And the idea is he's supposed to be like a Japanese patriot who is not a fan of American politics or culture. And apparently after word got out in Japan, after the first vignette aired, the fear among those who heard about it was that it was going to give the company a very negative image in the country. It's like you guys were trying to relive World War II, because Hirohito was Japan's emperor during the war. And while Japan was a U.S. enemy at the time, Hirohito is still beloved in Japanese society. And now you guys are sort of using a beloved Japanese cultural symbol as a hardcore American hating heel. And according to the Observer, he was scheduled for a huge push at first, apparently to be the top heel on Raw, aside from Evolution, of course. And now we've got to do some adjustments. Talk to me a little bit about Hirohito, because it feels like we got vignettes and then they just stop. And, now we're going to just roll him out as Kenzo. Check me up.
Kenzo Suzuki. Good God. Kenzo, I brought Kenzo in. Big guy, huge upside. And the Hirohito shit, see, I remember completely different than that. It was, I think Hirohito was viewed by some people almost Hitler-esque in Japan, which we didn't know. We thought what you had said, that this is a fucking hero there. And no, it wasn't. It was someone that was taken very negatively. And when they made the Hitler-esque reference, that was enough for us. Like, nope, okay. Let's move on. Let's come up with something else. So Kenzo Suzuki was born. I believe that was close to his real name. He had, his wife wanted to be in the business, and she spoke English. She spoke perfect English. So the idea was to package them with her being the mouthpiece for Kenzo and slide him right into a program with the All-American John Cena, who was United States champion, and he was kind of battling that front of folks that international stars that wanted to come in and overtake America, if you will. A little old-fashioned, but sometimes old-fashioned works, and he was not as good as the spot that he was placed in.
How long does it take before you guys realize that?
Whew. Well, we didn't let him work for a long time. So until a few months, actually, because we protected him so well. We kept him, we tried to keep him down on the farm as much as we could and just do angles and try and do some short things with him where you couldn't see through him at first. But unfortunately, he didn't continue to grow. He didn't get any better.
Who's down on him? Is it Vince that's down on him? Is it agents? Is it everybody?
I would say it started with the agents because Vince was high on him and I was high on him. So it was, we're trying to make it work because we had to. We needed heels. We needed new talent. And this was that era of, you know what? We're going to give guys a chance. We're going to give them little runs and see who can sprint and who can't.
I'm not saying, I want to be clear. I'm not saying now, but back in this day, back in 2004, how often was it for the agents to sort of change Vince's mind? I mean, if Vince comes out and he's hot and heavy on something and, hey, this is what we're going to do. And then maybe a guy like Arn Anderson, fills out a house show report or however you guys do it, or did it rather. Does that come in and it's just, hey, he is not improving. Is that enough or, for Vince to change his mind, or are there meetings about it? Or does Vince say, hey, let me see the tape? Or,
it's a time. Yeah, it's a time factor. And a lot of times he's going to listen to the feedback of the people that are out on the road with the talent every night. So if you tell me he's not getting it, then we're going to have a pretty good conversation with him and let him know that he needs to get it, or we're going to have to make changes. So if he's not getting it, then help him get it, because we weren't in the position at that time to say, okay, he's not getting it next. There wasn't any next in the wings.
Right.
And instead of just saying he ain't getting it next, work with him, figure it out. What does he need? If it's less ring time, then we'll do less ring time. If it's more ring time, less talk, let's do that. Let's figure this out versus just cut bait and send him back to wherever the hell he came from. And that's what we did. We tried.
Let's keep it moving here and talk about Backlash. Backlash is a bit of a disappointment. It does 270,000 buys, or a 0.50 buy rate. The main event, as we've covered, was Benoit, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels in a triple threat. And of course, the big show, or the big match that I remember, is Mick Foley and Randy Orton. And everybody is saying, this is a, WrestleMania level show as far as the work rate and match of the year level performances. But the buys are down, and they're way down. Even from the prior year, so in 2003, that Backlash where it was Bill Goldberg and The Rock did 350,000 buys. So we're down pretty significantly. But if you go back even further to 2002, there we saw Hulk Hogan and Triple H do 400,000 buys. So year after year, you're seeing Backlash and your pay-per-view numbers start to dip. Now it's a trend. When it happens as a one-off, you can say, it's a one-off, it's an anomaly, it won't be like that next year. But when 2003 is down from 2002 and now 2004 is down from 2003, are you guys starting to feel like, oh shit, man, we got to pull the nose up?
Well, you definitely always have to pull the nose up when business is down. But again, we knew this was a conscious effort. We knew that we were going to take a dip in business. We absolutely knew it, and we planned for it and looked at it as we have to make this investment in talent and in stories now, or we're never going to get out of it, because a lot of the old guard was gone and you had to do something. Not all of it's going to be right. Not all of it's going to click. And you've got all these eyeballs on you. You've got to do something, and you have to continually develop and redevelop and create new all the time. And that was the challenge at that point, where it's you would get demoralized in a lot of ways when you look at the numbers and you look at business and go, fuck. And Vince looked at it and goes, guys, there's only one way to go, and that's up. But we have to build this foundation. We have to get back to what it is that we do, get some of these talent over, and then we can start growing again. So we knew it. We knew it going in. That's one thing, people poo-poo, but it's I will never forget those discussions because it was frustrating. I don't want to take a step back. Sometimes you got to take 2 steps back to take 1 forward. And when you have a firm foundation, then you can grow a lot better. And it takes time to do that.
Let's talk about Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle is a guy who has had tremendous success. He's been with the company at this point, I don't know, I guess 5 or 6 years. He's only 35, but it looks like, he may be starting to wind it down here because he's got, obviously a neck issue that's been, predating even the Olympics in 96. And so a year prior to this, he has a experimental, I guess it were at the time, neck surgery with Youngblood out of San Antonio. And this is the guy I think most wrestling fans have heard. He sort of became the WWE go-to. So for Steve Austin or Edge or Rhino or Benoit or Lita or Bob Holly, if you have a neck issue, you went to see Youngblood. And Angle signed a 5-year deal in 2002. And he says that he's happy with the deal and he's going to finish the deal, but it looks like he's starting to wind it down because he's just, not feeling the way he used to. And he's on the heels of a big time match at WrestleMania 20 with Eddie Guerrero, but he had to be positioned at this point to be one of your tippy top stars. And when you hear, man, this neck surgery that we thought was going to be the magic pill, the cure all, is just not. How's the office perceive that? What's the relationship like with them and Kurt? I mean, it doesn't feel like this is an easy solution. And of course we know that Kurt's going to continue to wrestle, but he's going to do so through tremendous pain.
Well, Kurt won the Olympics with a broken freaking neck. So you knew you had a world-class athlete there. However, world-class athletes break down if they don't take care of themselves. And right. Kurt was breaking down. That's just what was happening. He was breaking down before our eyes. So we had to give him some kind of rest and let him have the time to actually heal and get better. If you were to ask Kurt, Kurt would tell you every night, no, I'm good. I can go. And then the doctor would shake his head. No, he's not. He can't. And you've got to listen to the medical professionals at that point and say, no, Kurt, protect him from himself. So that's what was happening with Kurt, man. He just had a lot of nagging injuries and things going on with his body, that the thought of him being able to go out every night and have matches the way that he used to have them, that wasn't going to be the new reality. Just wasn't going to happen.
How does that, does that affect any plans with Vince? How does he react to this news that, oh no, not another one? I know I hate to talk about it like this, but Austin's out, Goldberg's out, Rock is out. You've been priming this guy now. Fuck. Kurt Angle might be out too.
Yeah, it hurts. It just hurts. So you got to figure out something else for him to do, which is where we came up with the general manager role, to keep him on TV and keep his personality out there so that when he is ready to go, it's just easy to slide him in.
Right.
We didn't want to just give up on the character and say, okay, well, he's done and move on. So we just tried to find ways to keep him in front of the audience.
Let's keep it moving here. And let's talk about, the decision to keep him in front of the audience, but he's not going to be able to wrestle. So we're going to do, we're going to make him the GM. The way you do that is on April 15th, you have Big Show throw Angle off of some staging and scaffolding, which is said to be about 40 feet high. And a couple of weeks later, when he comes back, he's wheeled to the ring in a wheelchair, and he's explaining that the doctors have told him he could never wrestle again because of a severe injury. And he blames the fans because they have this, craving to see violence. And he blames Tori for laughing at him, and he brings her to the ring and asks her if it was funny that he can't have sex with his wife anymore. And so you're trying what you can to still make him an on-screen character, and he's obviously going to excel at that. Is this the most frustrating time of his career? Because he's got to feel like, man, this is okay, but this isn't what I want to
do. I think Kurt was extremely frustrated. Kurt wanted to be in the ring performing. That's what he loved to do. But he also grew to love a lot of these backstage vignettes that we were doing, and being able to find a different dimension to that character. And for the first time in a long time, give his body some rest. So Kurt embraced it.
Let's talk about how Nielsen is going to change the way ratings are done around this time. Obviously, ratings have been a big topic in wrestling going back to the Monday Night War, and something we've talked about extensively here. But they're going to be switching formats from a diary market to what's called local people meters, which is fun to say real fast. The big markets are going to get it first, of course, New York and Los Angeles. But this switch is significant. Now, we have sort of made fun of the old diary system on this show before. Explain to everybody the way a diary system works and how antiquated that really is.
Certain families are picked around the country, and they're giving a book to fill out in pen what they watch each week and how long they spend watching their TV, what television shows that they enjoy. And then they send it in to Nielsen, and Nielsen comprises those numbers, and that's how ratings were done. And it is one of the stupidest systems I've ever heard of in my life. Nielsen is a joke. I think it's a joke, because they have the technology to know what every single person, every time you turn on your television, if you're watching DirecTV, Comcast cable, Hulu, YouTube, your Apple TV, all of that. The technology is here today to understand and know what every single person in America that has a television set purchased after 2010, what the hell they're watching. Exactly. To the minute. But we use this system that is the holy grail of ratings because they were the only ones in the game. They never had to explain themselves. And when they explain themselves, it's like listening to Chinese geometry if you're from Hungary. And it's just maddening. And now they're like, okay, we're going to do this now. And it was a new system that no one had any faith in because it's hard to have faith in a system when you're changing from one system that means nothing to another system that means nothing. But yet that's what the advertisers and everybody were hanging their hats on.
I guess we should mention too, as you were explaining the diary, how easy that was to mess up, so let's say in my local Huntsville market, CBS is on WH&T channel 19. So channel 19 is the station it's on and what the station markets itself as, but WH&T are their actual call letters, but the programming they air is on CBS. So if that's a little confusing to you, imagine just regular America who's not sophisticated enough to listen to this podcast or understand the technical breakdowns we do on this show. And now we're going to give them a pamphlet with $1 if you're a white dude and say, hey, fill out these 17 pages of what you watch and when. So in that scenario, let's say you were watching programming we were just talking about, and let's say you were going to watch, I don't know, something on CBS. There's, whatever the new show is on CBS, and you write that show in there and you put CBS and you put channel 19, but you put WAFF, which is our local NBC affiliate, then NBC got the credit, not CBS. So that level of silliness existed with Nielsen. So sometimes these ratings weren't worth anything. And so now they're going to do what's called a people meter, where we're actually monitoring for real what they're watching, where people would put these meters on their TV. So they don't have to fill out a diary anymore, but certain people would hook this apparatus up to their TV and ta-da, now we know for real. Now under this, the reason we're covering this is because, on March 24th, Nielsen is testing out the new people meter market, and it shows that Smackdown under this new system would have a 42% lower rating than under the standards that were used before. The Simpsons were down 29%. Primetime was down. I mean, lots of shows that had historically been perceived as being more watched and capturing greater ad revenue because of the perceived ratings are now changing. And so like I know in the Nashville market, when they first got, people meter markets for radio, there were radio stations that weren't in the top 20. But then once they started to have people actually carry these monitors with them, so whenever they heard music, this would register what station it was. It changed everything. This people meter market thing is not something a lot of people have talked about, but within the television industry and eventually radio, it changed the way a lot of people reported their financials. Am I right?
Yeah, it did, but it also was as inaccurate as the old way. Because again, you're still relying on a handful of people, a very small handful of people.
Correct.
And you're not actually recording actual data. You're still taking what this hand-picked, hand-selected. So if you've got 1 million people in Houston, Texas, for example, you'll have maybe 6 Nielsen families. So out of 1 million people, those 1 million people are represented by 6 families. So what they watch now is going to determine how your rating is in everywhere. It had no rhyme or reason, even to do. I met with a company one time. I met with Nielsen, where Nielsen themselves even admitted in our conversation that their ratings were bogus, but they were the best that they could do. And the company that I was representing at the time and meeting with was a company it was a call company that said, okay, can we just expand this? Let's expand it. If you've got 6 families in this area, all right, what demographics are being represented, and is there a way that we can multiply that by, let's say, 100, maybe 1,000? And how they would do that would be by manning systems and calling people and actually getting the real data from them and be able to speak with them and compile that data. That's too much work. This is a pretty good sampling. We don't want to know that much.
Wow.
But we've got a good sampling. And my jaw just hung down because I thought Nielsen is all about ratings. They would want, if you had the ability to truly tell me who's watching what, when, and where, and how now, wouldn't you want to do that? And that ability exists, and it has existed for a long time.
Let's talk about the ratings for SmackDown in the month of May. May 6th gets 2.8. May 13th gets a 3.1. The SmackDown After Judgment Day gets a 2.9. On May 27th, it gets a 2.9. So ratings are not where, the company would like. They don't want 2s, they want 3s or better. And Wade Keller writes, some insiders point to Bruce Prichard as the primary reason for SmackDown's recent string of subpar shows. They say Prichard has manipulated his way into more power by bad-mouthing co-writer Dave Lagana behind his back to Vince McMahon. The Undertaker has, of course, helped Prichard's cause, as Prichard has long been considered one of Taker's main inner office allies. I don't know. I find this funny because when I read this now, and I have to admit, when I read this 15 years ago, I would not have viewed this way. But when I read this now, I'm like, okay, so Dave Lagana called Wade Keller and told him this. I mean, I'm not bad mouthing Lagana. I'm just saying for this to be an opinion, he's manipulated his way into more power by bad mouthing Dave Lagana behind his back to Vince McMahon. Who would have said that to Wade Keller if not Dave Lagana, right?
And that's why Dave Lagana was still working as writer on SmackDown, because I badmouthed him so bad.
Well, yeah. Brick by brick.
Yes.
So chat me up. How do you respond to the criticism here of,
you want me to respond to somebody who has never worked one day in the wrestling business in their life, who sits behind a keyboard and just writes shit that people tell him? I mean, that's absolutely just ridiculous. It's silly. It makes me laugh when people say this stupid shit because they have zero idea and so little regard for the truth that it doesn't deserve a response.
Okay, well, let's keep it moving here. Let's talk about Vince McMahon selling stock and the way he goes about doing it here, according to the Observer, is fascinating to me. The company is doing a roadshow for investors where they will be revealing long-term company goals. And following the roadshow, Vince McMahon will sell 7.1 million of his personal shares of the company, currently valued at in excess of $100 million. That stock is not available yet, and McMahon will probably wait until after the dividend comes out, where he'll be getting $3.2 million on July 8th before putting the stock up. And after the sale of his stock, his quarterly dividend would be 2.8 per quarter or 11.3 million annually. Plus he will have taken in around $100 million more in the sale. So he's socking huge money away this year. And when the sales are completed, Vince's ownership of WWE will drop from 80% to 67%. And it should also quiet any rumors that the company is thinking of or wanting to go back private. Those very close to the top when these rumors have come out have denied them, saying that Vince and Linda feel like being on the New York Stock Exchange gives their company a real world credibility as a major company that no other pro wrestling company has ever had. Not to mention, it made Vince McMahon hovering on the level of being a billionaire. From a company standpoint, because they have so much cash and cash equivalents in the hundreds of millions of dollars, both in the bank and low interest investments, there's always the thought of going into another business. At the same time, the sting of such flops as the WBF and XFL haven't gone away And the feeling is to stay within the wrestling world. They know so much of an aggressive approach as purchasing all the old tapes and ideas of how to monetize that library. So I find this fascinating, especially with, the new news of, Vince McMahon making huge personal investments into a new XFL. But the idea that he's going to do like a dog and pony show for investors and then sell the stock after, that's genius. Your numbers may be down a little bit. So let's go out here, show everybody the long-term plans, get them excited about the future, not down on the present, but excited for the future. And then let's cash out, baby. $100 million. Great strategy from Vince here.
He didn't cash out. He made more stock available to the public for them to sell. That was the purpose of the roadshow. So they're like, okay, if this is so great, that we need more stock to sell. And by Vince releasing the stock that he had, yes, he gets paid for that, but it also releases more stock out into the public market so that people can purchase stock. That's business. Do it every day.
All right. Now I'm ready to get you fired up. Are you ready to get fired up?
Sure.
They shot a major TV angle at a house show on May 2nd in El Paso. During the angle for the Guerrero-Layfield main event, where they had Eddie Guerrero's mother suffer a heart attack due to an attack by Layfield. After Guerrero got the pin in the match, he went around soaking up the cheers, and he talked about how proud he was to return to El Paso as champion, cut a promo, and brought his family into the ring. And he first introduced his wife and 2 daughters, and then he gave his wife flowers, and he talked about being so close to Mother's Day. So he brought his mother into the ring and gave her flowers. And then Layfield came back out while this was going on and nailed Guerrero with a clothesline. Then he grabbed Eddie's mother in what was described as a Vulcan pinch to the neck, basically trying to give the illusion of hurting her without actually doing anything. And the family was freaking out while Eddie couldn't do anything to save his mother. Finally, officials came from backstage to break it up, and Layfield posed with the belt, and Guerrero's mother went out on a stretcher and an oxygen mask while Guerrero recovered and did a great job, apparently making all of this seem legit. I think everyone realized how dead Guerrero JBL was as a pay-per-view main event. So they are going to desperate storyline lengths to give this a shot of adrenaline. From what we understand, they were thrilled with the Guerrero's daughters and how they pulled off their roles. And apparently Eddie's mother's blood pressure legitimately went up as she was in the ring because of all the excitement and pressure of the angle, although nobody knew it until afterwards, and she ended up fine. You've told this story before. That's not the way you tell it though.
Well, no, because of course, who reported that? Was that FW? What is it? FWK or FDM?
It's FDM.
Okay, figures. Well, first of all, JBL was never going to grab Eddie's mom in any way of trying to make it like he hurt her. All he did was going to grab her and say, "Hey, look at your son," but not in a mean physical way. She was a 73-year-old woman. She was going to go down, and what took place is she went down, and the excitement of it got to her, and there was fear of her having a heart attack. And actually, as all this shit was going out, she couldn't get her breath. She couldn't get anything. And the doctor's like, she's having a fucking heart attack. While we're at the ring, I'm like going, "Hey, good acting, doc." But he wasn't acting. She wasn't acting. And Eddie Guerrero sure as fuck wasn't acting. It was a serious moment that we didn't know what the hell was going on. And we got her to the back, and we got the ambulance and everything there to get her checked out. It was a scary situation. It was a real scary deal for just something to do on Mother's Day in Eddie's hometown. And, it was a strong angle. It was something that I thought about when I sat there and looked, and hey, Mother's Day, we're in El Paso. It's Eddie's hometown. Could have some fun here. And that's what we did. Right or wrong, it was what it was. And fortunately, Eddie's mom got a little worked up, and there was a health scare there, legit. But she was okay. She ended up being okay at the end of the day, and everybody got out. We got a great angle, we got a real story, and I got threatened by Eddie Guerrero several times, and everybody lived on to have a happy life.
Let's talk about IGN Film Force. They're going to report around this time that Triple H is at the top of the list to replace Arnold Schwarzenegger as the title character in the long in development King Conan Crown of Iron. I don't know. This sort of took me aback. I didn't know that this was ever even discussed, but apparently it was. And the idea here is, I guess, Triple H was previously rumored to be Conan's estranged son, but now maybe he was going to be Conan the Barbarian. That didn't wind up being the case. When did you first hear that Triple H may have a shot at this? And was this him trying to, was this a WWE push to sort of recreate the success that The Rock had? I mean, here in 2004, The Rock wasn't who he is now, but he was still well on his way. What can you tell us about Triple H as Conan?
God, those roles come through all the time. People saying, hey, this guy would be great for that. This guy would be great for that. That's all this was Arnold was talking about doing a remake of Conan, and Triple H was one of the names that was put in the ringer, and it got to the point of, hey, this could happen, and it's a possibility that he could play in the next Conan. It's nothing more than that.
Realistically,
it happens every single day.
How different would the wrestling world be had he ventured into movies, did Conan, it becomes a huge hit, and he follows The Rock's footsteps? And I mean, wrestling could look a lot different now, couldn't it?
Possibly could.
All right, boys and girls, we got to run a timeout right now. We want to thank our day one sponsor, Blue Chew. And I want to ask you, why haven't you tried it already? I think we've all heard the old, maybe it's a cliche at this point, sex is like pizza. Even when it's bad, it's still pretty good. Well, remember the worst pizza you ever had? I started to say school lunch pizza, but that actually wasn't that bad. I've had worse. And yeah, I ate it. It was fine. But man, when I think about the best pizza I ever had, that was John's in New York. I remember that very, very well. It left an impression. That's what we're talking about here. That's the analogy. You want that terrible hotel pizza, or you want some John's from New York? That's what we're talking about. Blue Chew is going to deliver it for you. We're talking about the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part. It's all online. So that means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. And Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. So discover your options at BlueChew.com. Let's chew it and do it, boys. We've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code WRESTLE at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is WRESTLE, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. Let's get to Judgment Day 04. The show drew a legitimate sellout, announced that 18,722 fans. Meltzer would say the paid attendance was around 13,500. The gate is really big, $813,000, which is the second largest live gate in the history of California wrestling. Of course, the current record, which is going to be destroyed when WrestleMania comes to the Staples Center next year, is $907,000 for SummerSlam back in 2001. The main event there was Steve Austin versus Kurt Angle and The Rock versus Booker T. So you're at, an all-time high there. And you got to be, we've talked about how, the business is down here in 04. But when you come in and you're setting records like this, that's pretty encouraging, is it not? Was LA always a strong market for you guys?
No, not always. LA, kind of like the business, would be cyclical. And during this time, thank God, it was a good market and it did well for us here.
The dark match, or it's not a dark match, it's on Heat. Mark Jindrak and Funaki Meltzer would say, Teddy Long is totally wasted trying to make lemonade out of Jindrak. He went on a rant about how everyone in LA is phony, taking drugs and using the Hollywood diet. And then he's making a motion like he's throwing up in a toilet bowl, and how everybody's using plastic surgery to change their look. But, you know, they're trying to push Jindrak as this stud star. Doesn't wind up working out in the end, though. Why was Jindrak a miss in WWE?
I don't think that Mark ever really loved the business and or wanted to be in the business. I think he landed in the business in the power plant, WCW. So Jindrak's one of those guys that came over when WCW was purchased, had what appeared to be a good upside, just never clicked and never turned on in his brain to get to that next point in the business.
Our first match on the show, and you watched this for the first time in a long time, is Rob Van Dam.
I watched it on the anniversary. I actually watched it on May 16th, 2019, 15 years to the day after it first happened.
Cool. Rob Van Dam and Rey Mysterio beat the Dudleys 15 minutes, 19 seconds, 3 stars on the Observer. I mean, really a Hall of Fame crew here. I enjoyed this match. You know, Rob Van Dam and Rey Mysterio is not a tag team I ever thought I wanted to see, but I thought this was pretty good. What did you think?
It was really good. You know, I even go back and, talk about the open of the show, which was fucking fabulous, but I got goosebumps. You know how you get the goosebumps that will stay with you for a while?
Yep.
When there's a shot of Eddie Guerrero in the middle of that, where the commentator says, "Is there life after death?" And I just got goosebumps and sat there that just held through the finish of the cold open. And that was just, again, some of that shit, man, was so good. That's the work of Chambers and those guys, just put some great shit together. And then you start off with Ray and Rob Van Dam against the Dudleys. All four had great chemistry. The Dudleys and Van Dam, back from their ECW days, they'd worked together so many times. And it was a good, solid, great opener for the pay-per-view.
Without question. There is one funny little thing that happens in the middle of the match. The sound guy just randomly plays Rob Van Dam's music, which I guess spoils the finish. When you watch this back, did you laugh out loud?
Oh God, man, that shit happens.
That's so great. Next up, we got Booker T doing a promo, and there's these strange voices coming out of the room, and he's got all these candles lit, but Kurt Angle and Luther Reigns come out. Angle is going to blame Torrie Wilson for his career being over. And, so he says, he's going to cost Wilson her career. And he announces that if Torrie doesn't win the next match, she's fired. So it's Torrie Wilson and Dawn Marie. They're going to go 6 minutes and 14 seconds, which Meltzer says was too long. And, they're doing their best, but they're probably, I don't know, not pay-per-view worthy based on wrestling, but that's not why they're here. They're here to have Torrie Wilson rip Dawn Marie's tights off, and she's got on a skimpy little flesh-colored thong, and she's pinned pretty quickly after a backslide. Quarter star. This is just to get some scantily clad women on the pay-per-view here, is it not?
Well, I would never argue about ever having Dawn Marie or Torrie Wilson scantily clad anywhere. But man, going back, even the Booker T interview was just classic stuff. It just made me reminisce of how much fun it always was to work with Booker, because you could give Booker anything and he would make it better. And that's what Booker did with this whole program with The Undertaker, with the voodoo shit. It was great. And then, of course, Luther Reigns pushing the box to the ring. And if you come out of a box, motherfucker, you are over. So Kurt Angle not just came out of a box, he rose out of a box, which really made that son of a bitch over.
Thank you for that.
Just saying.
What's your favorite Dawn Marie match?
Probably this one. Yeah. This one, just saying.
Well, I don't know if there's any way to save this next match. It's Mordecai and Scotty 2 Hotty. They're going to go 3 minutes and 1 second. Of course, Mordecai's debuting here and gets a win by pinfall. Meltzer would say he had a Undertaker / Kane-like ring entrance and a strong opening presentation. Quote, once the bell rang, the crowd was dead. They're trying to make him both slow moving, but intense, and it didn't work and it didn't get over. His finisher is the Scott Hall Outsider's Edge dud. When you watch this presentation back of, Mordecai making his big entrance into the ring and then the actual match itself, when he's trying to do a lot of character work, saw it for the first time in a long time. What'd you think?
Well, let me say this about that. First of all, no, Dave, we weren't trying to make him slow moving and intense. We were trying to make him intense. And that was Mordecai's vision, was that he would be slow moving, which is what killed it. It just didn't work. He needed to go once the bell rang. And, my notes, which you'd love, is, best match he ever had. Speaking of Mordecai. And that pretty much sums it up right there, because he had so much upside, so much promise, so much potential. And this was his debut match and the best one he was ever going to have.
Yeah. Poor Kevin. Next up, Jacqueline is going to give Chavo Guerrero a present of bra and panties to wear. Of course, he throws them down. His father picks them up and looks interested in trying them on, though. Meltzer would say that's the curse of being 55 years old and still getting a check from WWE as a performer, because it means you're going to wind up humiliated many times over. Your response?
Fuck Dave Meltzer. And here's another opportunity where you look at something and I know everybody will sit here and go, oh my God, I gush over the Guerreros. I do gush over the Guerreros because I think that they were just that damn good. And Chavo Guerrero Sr. stole the show in this regard because his subtle acting and everything that Meltzer is accusing they of making him do, those are Chavo Sr.'s ideas that took him over the top, that gave him that extra dimension of personality that was entertaining, that people could identify with. So that's the kind of shit just pisses me off. And Chavo Guerrero made it. I loved the scene backstage and Chavo's underplaying it and Chavito catching him was just pure classic.
Let's talk about the next match. Rico and Charlie Haas are going to retain the tag titles over Bob Holly and Billy Gunn in 10 minutes and 26 seconds. Meltzer would say they tried this match out the night before in San Bernardino and the crowd cheered Holly and Gunn. So they had them come out, and from the start, they play that neither Holly nor Gunn wanted to be in with Rico. And the announcers never acknowledged that Rico used to manage Gunn or that any of that ever happened. I think they want to erase that part of their history. Rico kept grabbing their asses, and one person in the company told me they could nickname Holly and Gunn the Hardcore Asses. The match was all homosexual comedy. Haas, for whatever reason, looked the worst he has since his OVW days, and his punches never his strong point, became the focal point of his offense. And it was so bad that Jackie Gator at ringside was pounding on the mat to get a clapping deal going, and the crowd just slept through it. Finish saw Holly have Haas up for the Alabama Slam, but Rico super kicked him and Haas scored a roll up, 3/4 stars. This feels thrown together. I didn't enjoy the pairing of either one of these tag teams as a fan, and it was just sort of there for me. How about you?
It was a fun match, but it wasn't a good match. It just was kind of in that spot to be a ha-ha filler. Not a lot of chemistry with those guys. Trying something with Charlie Haas, and at least you had Jackie out there to kind of spice things up a little bit, but not a whole lot there. I mean, the audience didn't care, the talent didn't care, and you could feel that. So it was not something I'd want to see again.
Next up, we got Chavo Guerrero. He's going to pin Jacqueline to win the cruiserweight title. You heard me right. In 4 minutes and 47 seconds. The gimmick here is that Chavo was wrestling the match with one hand tied behind his back, and he actually does a few one-armed backbreakers. And Chavo Classic eventually unties his son while the referee is dazed, and the finish sees Classic distract the ref while Chavo uses a Goria special bomb on her, and he wins the title back. So they got a dud rating in the Observer. These man versus woman intergender matches you've never really enjoyed. What'd you think of this one? And does this sort of devalue? I mean, it sort of presents the cruiserweight belt as really being a ha-ha here, does it not?
No, not really, because Jacqueline could probably beat 90% of the cruiserweights anyway, still could today. I enjoyed it. It had a story to it, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. And as I am watching this thing and watching what Chavo Guerrero Jr. is doing with one arm tied behind his back is masterful. It's hard enough to work with having both your arms, but Chavo only having one arm and keeping the other one behind his back was masterfully done, and it had a great story to it. And this match was a lot of fun. I loved it. I thought it was a great story, told well by everybody in the ring, and is what Chavo Classic on the outside of the ring. So everything got done, and I do hate intergender matches, and I like this one.
Because there's a fucking Guerrero in it. That's why you like this one.
He made it work, and Jacqueline, and she made it work.
Next up, we've got something that doesn't feel like it ever happened, but it did. John Cena is going to wrestle Rene Dupree on pay-per-view here for the United States title. Cena's going to get the win, and Meltzer would say it's a better match than expected. Series of near falls, clean pin. Cena gets the win after the FU. Cena gets 3 stars here in the Observer. And I guess we should mention Cena is fresh off of a U.S. title win at WrestleMania 20 from the Big Show. So this is the beginning of the big singles push for John Cena. And we haven't talked a ton about Rene Dupree, but it does feel like what we fans hear is there was a ton of heat. And, if you ask one of the boys, I think most of them would say, oh, that was self-inflicted. John Cena and Rene Dupree though, what'd you think of the match? And what can you tell us about Rene Dupree that we haven't talked about before?
Well, first of all, as far as the match, one thing that stuck out to me more than anything, I mean, was just larger than life, was the reaction Cena got when he came out. Holy shit. John Cena was at that point a mega star, and that crowd hung on every word that he had. It was amazing. It was just truly amazing. Cena was on fire with his raps and shit. Couldn't be touched on this night. And as far as the match goes, you know, people forget how young Rene Dupree was at this point. I think he was like maybe 20 years old at this point, and he was able to hang. He looked great. And, you know, unfortunately, for whatever reason, I think that more than anything, it was the immaturity of Rene Dupree at the time, a young kid being thrown into a man's business without really being properly prepared for what to expect. It was a different business than his father, Emile Dupree's maritime promotion. So for Rene to come into this and do what he did, I thought he had a huge upside, and wish it would have worked out a lot better for Rene Dupree. But in this showing, I thought he had a tremendous showing.
All right, next up on the show, we've got Undertaker and Booker T. Undertaker's going to get the win in 11 minutes and 25 seconds. Meltzer would say Michael Cole had an annoying night, although it probably wasn't entirely his fault. He consistently pushed the idea all night that this was the Undertaker's first match on pay-per-view since WrestleMania. The only thing is, it's the first match on pay-per-view for every single person on this show since WrestleMania. Also, when giving the alleged figure out, he noted that the Lakers played the night before and that everyone's making a big deal about how it sold out, but they didn't have 18,722 people. Meltzer would say, no, actually they had 18,999 people. And I'm damn sure a lot more were paid on this show than WWE, and they can't possibly present themselves at the same level as the Lakers in Los Angeles. Booker came out with a big bag of magic dust from an unmanned grave or unnamed grave. And after referee Nick Patrick got bumped, Booker pulled out the dust and threw it in Undertaker's eyes, and Undertaker no-sold it. Meltzer would say, well, that was quite the waste of time, wasn't it? Booker worked on Undertaker's knee, wrapping it around the post, used the axe kick finisher. Undertaker kicks out, sits up, gets the high kick, choke slam, tombstone. That's the finish. Star and 3/4. I love these guys. Individually, I've had some of my favorite matches from both of these guys, but this one, for whatever reason, the chemistry just wasn't there for me. But you love both of them. What'd you think?
I didn't think the chemistry was there for this match either, but fuck. That's right. Triple fuck Dave Meltzer. It was off. You know what I mean? It just it didn't click for this particular match. And the guys have had matches before and after that were tremendous. And watching this, I kept thinking, wow, maybe one of them's having a bad day. Both of them are having a bad day. Just really did not jive. Didn't.
Why do you think that is though? I mean,
some days, man, you can have, some days you and I have just shitty shows.
Yeah. Just an off day.
Yeah. And I think that's what this was here, where that's why I say probably both of them was just everything felt either one step behind or just one step too fast, and didn't really work out for me. I watched it and went, not digging it, because I thought the story leading up to it was very good.
Well, here's our main event. While we're really here, Meltzer gives it 3 3/4 stars. I think it's better than that. I absolutely love this match. They're going to go 23 minutes and 22 seconds. This is the biggest match of JBL's career, main eventing a pay-per-view, and in a big way. JBL gets the win by DQ, believe it or not. So, yeah. Layfield comes out to a surprising lack of a reaction at first. This is directly from the Observer, but then cut a strong promo where he guaranteed victory. And this set up the big face pop for Guerrero, although it was noted by several that the actual ring entrance reaction was stronger for Cena. Would you agree with that? You watched it back. You were there live. Cena get a bigger pop than Eddie here in LA?
No, I think I'd say they were equal.
Lame.
Well, I did. Because I was waiting for that pop and listened to both of them because I was so shocked at the pop that John Cena got. I'd say they were equal. I would say it's just as good for Eddie.
These guys pull out all the stops. Guerrero's doing planches. They're doing fall away slams on the floor. They're doing backdrops on the Spanish announce table that doesn't break. And then Eddie tackles the referee, Brian Hebner. And then Layfield grabs a chair and hits Guerrero with what was described as a sick chair shot to the head. That's an understatement. You need to go watch it. Meltzer would say Guerrero bladed, and that's hardly the word. It was coming out of his forehead like a faucet, reminiscent of Vince McMahon in the Zach Gowen match, or maybe even worse. After what happened to Kurt Angle, you'd think they'd be leery of the kind of chair shot impact directly on the head. I mean, this is unbelievable, the amount of blood and gore that we're seeing here. And they're pulling out all the stops. There's a DQ called eventually. And this happens where Guerrero misses the frog splash, but Layfield brought in the belt while Hebner was distracted. And then Guerrero gets it and he uses it in front of Hebner. So there's the DQ, and the place is not happy. There's a big groan. And post match, we've got a ton of belt shots by Guerrero on Layfield, and he's going berserk, and blood is everywhere. Another chair shot, a frog splash. It's a big celebration for Eddie, but what a battle. I don't know that words we can't really describe this one. This is one you got to see. Am I right?
It is. And it's the match that was the coming out party for John Layfield. This was the match that solidified his heel run and his first singles push to where we went, okay, finally this big son of a bitch is going to do it. So for so many reasons, this match was memorable. It was a great match. It made John Layfield, and for the sheer brutality of it, it was scary. And I hated, I'm one of those old timers. I used to love the blood and guts and everything. But then as you get older, you kind of become immune to it. And watching this and seeing some of the kids' faces at ringside, watching Eddie bleed, it was very uncomfortable to watch. And it was too much, way too much, way too much. That part of it was an accident, and that is unfortunately some of the shit that happens from time to time. And I don't know that it created any more drama or that it enhanced the match nearly as much as I think they thought it did. It just kind of made it gory after a while. And you just wanted it to end for Eddie's sake.
Wade Keller would write, once Guerrero got backstage, he went into shock and was taken to the hospital. He got 16 stitches and 2 bags of IV fluids to rehydrate him and was released within a few hours. The deep gash was considered nothing more than human error. It was not scripted for him to bleed that heavily, and most within WWE believed that there was too much blood to the point that it took away from the drama, since rather than getting into Guerrero's comebacks, viewers were either rightfully queasy and grossed out or simply concerned for Guerrero's health. So you've told the story about being backstage, and I know you'll tell it again here now about your conversation with Eddie and going to the hospital and all that stuff. But when you're watching this match, are you at Gorilla? Are you sitting with Vince? What's Vince's reaction?
I remember vividly sitting at Gorilla, and there's even a point in the match, I think, when Charles Robinson goes down, that we had sent word with Charles, tell him to get out of there. Go home, end it. And they didn't. They kept going. So I was at Gorilla. I was afraid for Eddie's health and just wanted to get him back and get him taken care of. So it was frustrating, and I had tunnel vision. I couldn't tell you who was with me, who was around me, anything like that. All I could tell you during the match was watching the match and cringing the more shit he did. So I kept waiting for him to just fall down and pass out.
Right. It's pretty crazy that, this is, do you think Guerrero, I know we're saying it's human error, but do you think he wanted a little more? And it's a big test for him. We've talked a lot about the pressures that were on him as champion and how seriously he took this. Do you think he wanted a little more, but just didn't realize how much more he was going to get here?
I don't know. His dad made his name Gory Guerrero for a reason. All of his matches were bloody and gory, but I don't think that I know for a fact that Eddie did not plan on that much blood. Maybe once it came, they thought, oh hell, this is great. This is great. This is going to add to the match drama of it all. I just didn't think it did. In hindsight, when you look at it, you go, man, it just left people worried instead of invested in wanting him to kick JBL's ass. You just wanted him to go get help, type of a thing. And that's a tough call, especially when guys are out there in the middle of a great match like that. And I do remember saying, end it. Let's go, get him out of there. Just go to the finish, because everything they did after that, you don't really remember until Eddie blows the big comeback after the match. So they could have gone home right then, and Eddie blown whatever comeback he could have blown and gone home and just got out of there. But that's all hindsight. That's 2020. It just was a scary, scary night, and seeing him back on the trainer's table and then putting the IVs in him to take him to the hospital. And the only reason we were doing that was because he had lost a lot of blood and the gash needed to be stitched up. It wasn't a super glue gash. It was one that needed stitches, and he needed to get checked out by a doctor. So if you take him in an ambulance, they'll take you in right away. If you go walk in, you're going to sit there and wait for a while. And that was the original mindset. And then when Eddie ripped all the IVs out and stormed out of the room, then it became the battle. Looking at him and just saying, Eddie, two things are going to happen here. You can either get cleaned up, go to the hospital in the ambulance, or we'll sit here and watch and wait, and you'll pass out from loss of blood and fatigue, and you'll still go to the hospital, but you'll probably stay longer. I'm sorry.
I know this is a silly question. Just bear with me for a minute. Do you think that Eddie felt like it was up to him to help get this match over? Because everybody heading into this, I mean, it was even written in the newsletters that the perception was that a JBL Eddie Guerrero main event wasn't really the attraction that was resonating with fans, and it was quote unquote dead. Do you feel like that Eddie may not have gone to this great extent had he had a match here with, say, an Undertaker, a more established character, but now he's got, this big task, this unenviable task of, I'm supposed to be the top draw, and I've got it going against me that I've never been positioned as the top guy. I've only been champ for 2 months. I've got it going against me that I'm smaller in stature or whatever. And now I'm in here, even though fans maybe buy me as a top guy, I'm supposed to help get over a brand new guy, not like cement my footing as a main eventer against the Undertaker, a more established brand. But now I've got to get over this other guy that maybe fans aren't totally sold on yet. I need to do something special. I need to do something extra. And maybe we went too far as a result.
Maybe. I know that was Eddie's charge and that was Eddie's challenge. And Eddie really wanted to get John over, knew that he could get him over. So that was Eddie Guerrero's charge, was to make himself a new opponent, a believable opponent that he could draw money with. And they did. And that night is what did it. That was a prelude to the book. And we got a lot of nice chapters out of it.
Let's talk about, JBL, because he said if it had been anybody but Eddie Guerrero, you would have never heard of JBL. But because of Eddie, I had that incredible run and it was just the right time. I had the perfect foil and this incredible Latino star. He was one of my best friends. And JBL has also said that Eddie was a groomsman at his wedding. I mean, what did this match mean to the JBL character and just Layfield's career in general?
Everything, because as I said, that was a jumping off point, and Eddie could have laid down. Eddie could have not wanted to go out and have that kind of match, but he did. And he made John Layfield a believable opponent and somebody that was mean and nasty that you could hate, a heel that you could actually hate with a baby face that you truly cared about and loved. So it was so much of that is on Eddie Guerrero. And the other part of it is Layfield stepped up. Layfield stepped up to the plate, swung for the fences, and hit a home run with it.
Well, you watched Judgment Day 04 for the first time in a long time this week. Scale of 1 to 10. What do you give it?
8.5.
Really?
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't think I would. Again, full disclosure, I say this a lot. A lot of times I sit down to watch and I think, well, I'm just going to fast forward through some of this shit. I remember this. This was another one of those that I watched all the way through and stopped what I was doing because I'll try to multitask and do a lot of different things. But I stopped for the Cena Dupree match And the last match just had 100% of my attention. Two really great matches and a good story that ended up the night, and again, catapulted us into the summer.
It did. And this was a fun time to go back and revisit this one, especially on the heels of our JBL show. We hope you guys have dug what we did this week with Judgment Day. Sorry, we're a week late on this one. Life threw us a curveball, as it does from time to time, but we'll be back next week, and we're doing something totally different next week, Bruce. It's going to be a Q&A episode, and people have been asking for this one for a while. We don't do these maybe as often as we should, but I'm looking forward to next week, Bruce. How about you?
Should be fun. Q me and Amy. Oh, wait a minute. No, you do the Q, I do the A.
Okay. I feel like,
why don't we flip that script?
Yeah. I don't want to do any A with you. So,
okay.
But I am looking forward to, Something to Wrestle this Sunday. Check it out. You can watch live from anywhere you have a smart device or an internet connection. StarCastOnFight.com is the place. And as always, leave us, some comments on Twitter. We want to hear from you. At Prichard Show is our show account. He is at Bruce Prichard. I am at Hey, it's Conrad. And we'll see you next week right here on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard.
Shaka Khan.
Hey guys, Eric Bischoff here. Now, if you need cash without the controversy, the team at SaveWithConrad.com can help. But don't take my word for it.
Hi, my name is Richard Smith. I'm from Moss Point, Mississippi. One of my friends at work said I just been refinancing and my interest rate was 9%, and he said he got his for 2.3. So I said, well, maybe I should try. Got a hold of Diane. She kept in touch the whole entire time. We owned 2 houses and we rented one out, and my renter quit paying, so we gave it back to the mortgage company. And because we did that, we had to wait 3 years for an FHA loan to go back through. The one thing that Conrad said on his podcast was, we'll never tell you no. We might say, not now, this is what we need to do, and we'll make sure we get it done. Well, prime example, 3 years. And when they say no money out of pocket, there's no money out of pocket. They figure it out. But like, she was so quick that, don't worry about this, I got this first. That's what impressed me the most. My name is Richard Smith, and I saved $700 a month with SaveWithConrad.com.
And unlike the dirt sheets, these reviews don't lie. With over 1,000 5-star reviews, find out for yourself how much Conrad and his team can save you by checking out SaveWithConrad.com, and do it today.
NMLS number 32416, equal housing lender, SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what AdFreeShows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-Free Shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that AdFreeShows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. AdFreeShows.com.